On the way home from every single camping trip that I take with my partner Laura, I start talking about how we should go camping all the time. And on the way home from every writing retreat we do together, I start talking about how we should do writing retreats like all the time. This same pattern is true also for just when we go out for the evening, if we're going out contra dancing, shape note singing, queer burlesque, and about 15 other favorite activities on my favorites list. Every one of them I want to be doing more often all the time. And it's also true for quiet nights at home, which I definitely also want a lot more of. I am a yes person. It is hard for me to say no. And it's not just going out and staying in that I both want to do more of all the time. I also want to be working more, and I want to be making more music. And there's a long list of justice issues and awesome organizations I wish I had more time to give to. This isn't just a problem with my days and my weeks, it is a problem with my hours and my minutes. In fact, every morning when I open my computer, I feel like there are a dozen different things I need to do, and they all need to be done first. In my household now, we call this Mars rovering. When the rover robot first landed on Mars, it had a long list of sciencey things to do, and it would start on one task, and then it would decide that another task was more urgent, and so it would switch to a different task before it had finished the first one. And it started switching back and forth between the tasks faster and faster, until eventually it was paralyzed and motionless. It had reached a state where it was spending 100% of its processing power deciding what to do first, because everything had to be done first, and it just sat there doing nothing. I feel you, Mars rover. Robot technicians, the robot scientists, call this thrashing. And the way out of thrashing, the way out of an overscheduled calendar, is to say no to some things, some of the time at least. Saying no for many of us, much of the time, though, is buried treasure, friends. It is so valuable, more valuable than actual gold sometimes, but it is elusive to find. And folks of different genders are often raised to struggle with saying no, but in different ways and for different reasons. The practice of setting boundaries in general is rife with the power dynamics, not only of gender, but race and class and ableism. The list goes on. But if you are looking for buried treasure, it's important to know your true north. True north is north according to the Earth's axis, not magnetic north, which is always changing. Magnetic north is this invisible force that will pull you in the wrong direction. You need to constantly adjust your compass for it. I basically failed out of Boy Scouts as a kid, so I had to look this up. But they call it compass declination adjustment. Every time you look at your compass, you need to adjust it so those invisible forces aren't pulling you off course. The things that some of us were taught as children about being polite or avoiding conflict or how women or men are supposed to act, what we learned about the meaning of money or the meaning of shame or the meaning of success, as this worship series has talked about, all of these things push and pull on our relationships. They tug at our priorities, warping our internal compass. These are just some of the invisible forces that pull us off course when we are searching for what is valuable. Saying a good no is a spiritual practice, a practice that grounds us in our values and points the way towards our own true north. It is spiritual declination adjustment. A good no means setting a boundary that's rooted in your values. A good no is good for relationships, it is good for movement building, and it is a good spiritual practice. And I'm going to talk about all three. I volunteer for the UU Musicians Association, And someone asked me a few weeks ago to volunteer for a specific role with them. In fact, 3 separate people asked me to volunteer for this specific role. It was a role that needed to be filled, absolutely, and none of us could think of anyone else that was willing to do it. And so I heard this familiar refrain in my mind that says, I don't see how I can say no. The word how is doing a lot of work there. Sometimes it's doing a sort of sleight of hand. Sometimes it means I'm not in a position to say no. Work obligations and financial insecurity and power dynamics are just a few of the many very real reasons folks end up in a position where setting a boundary just doesn't feel like an option, and that is real. But sometimes the how really is a question of how. Like, what words could I possibly use that would make it okay? For me, as someone who values relationships but can be conflict avoidant, how can I possibly say no is a legit question I struggle with. A book I love about this, that book, that's a great book with a nerdy name, says that a good no has 3 parts. Are you ready for them? The first is yes with an exclamation point. Cue the slide. The second is no with a period. And the third is yes with a question mark. Beautiful. Yes with an exclamation point is an affirmation of what is important to you. Name the values that you have in common with the asker. I love this organization, and I want to find ways to help that fit my gifts and my schedule. No with a period is setting your boundary. Say it clearly, with or without a why. I can't take on that role right now. And yes with a question mark. Make an offer that invites continued relationship. I'd love to check back in a few months, or can we talk about ways I can support the person that does take on this role? We do this all the time without thinking about it. Thanks for the invite. I'd love to see you, but I can't make it this weekend. Any chance you're available next weekend? Yes is the word of community. No is the word of individuality. Yes is the word of connection. No is the word of protection. Let's get political. A good no isn't just about making weekend plans. It's necessary for following the true north of our values at any scale. In many settings, a simple no thanks should be enough to set a boundary. This is particularly true if we are fighting against white supremacy or rising authoritarianism. We don't need to affirm anything or invite further relationships with people denying basic human rights. You don't owe affirmations or an offer of relationship to anybody. And I will say that I saw an interview the other day with New York's new mayor-elect, Mamdani, who my family now refers to as my boyfriend. He was asked about President Trump, and his answer had some yes, no, yes vibes. He said, if the president ever decides that he wants to start working on the affordability crisis he campaigned on, I would be happy to talk with him. But know that if he comes for our people, to get to any of us, he will have to go through all of us. Mamdani is setting clear boundaries and standing up to bullies, but he is also affirming the shared needs for an affordable city that includes the need of Trump's supporters, and he's keeping the door open to possible collaboration on shared interests. I imagine this is part of the reason why 1 in 10 New Yorkers who voted for Donald Trump a year ago voted for a Muslim socialist this month. I think it's his yes, no, yes vibes. A good no in politics, a good no that builds strong justice movements, is fixed on the true north of our values, an affirmation of what we hold in common, a clear boundary that claims our power, and an invitation to work together in the places we agree. This formula is in some ways the basis of nonviolent resistance. Whenever we refuse cooperation with an authoritarian regime, whenever we take to the streets, we are proclaiming an affirmation of what we value. We are saying no to injustice. And if we do it well, we are keeping the door open for a wider and wider circle of our neighbors to join us in the work. In the late 90s, there was a growing movement in Serbia to resist authoritarianism there. The movement, called Otpor, which means resistance, was rooted deeply in nonviolence. Through 2 years of organizing escalating protests, Otpor activists would send care packages of food and cigarettes to soldiers in the army, and they would commiserate with police officers about poor pay and working conditions. They wanted to make sure that when presented with a hard choice, the army and the police would side with the opposition rather than the regime. And it came to pass. On October 5th in the year 2000, people from all over the country descended on Belgrade in long lines of cars and trucks and buses, and they filled the highway. And the police had put up roadblocks, and officers had been given orders to shoot the nonviolent protesters. But they refused the orders. When they saw that they were outnumbered, they abandoned their posts. And the image of a large yellow bulldozer, driven by civilians in nonviolent resistance, plowing through army barricades, became a symbol of the successful nonviolent revolution called the Bulldozer Revolution. More than 500,000 people amassed in the capital, and when tear gas didn't disperse them, some members of the riot police began to run away, while others happily joined the demonstrations. Nonviolent resistance undermined and then overpowered the standing army. Mass civil disobedience overthrew the authoritarian regime. And Otpor became the model for activists in other places, activists who went on to launch the Rose Revolution in Georgia 2 years later and the Orange Revolution in Ukraine a year after that. They said to the police, yes, we affirm a shared love of our people and a commitment to decent working conditions for everyone. No to authoritarianism, and yes to the possibility of working together. We've talked about the personal no and the communal no, so let's tie them together to arrive at our spiritual no. Yes, no, yes has been a clarifying practice for me. If I'm having a hard time saying no, it's often because I'm truly feeling torn between the ask and my relationship with the asker. Or it's because I'm thrashing, like the Mars rover, between competing values in my own heart. But forcing myself to name the values tugging at me within the question, reflecting honestly on my own limitations and my boundaries, and imagining possibilities for future connection and community, I can't think of 3 better questions for adjusting my internal compass to align my values with my commitment, to align my priorities with my calendar. It hasn't quite cured my Mars rovering, but it has certainly helped me to respond to the list that hunts me down each morning rather than just constantly react to whatever's in front of me. Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal tradition. And that means that instead of handing down a rule book from on high, the community we imagine and the directions to get there are all decided in conversation here together. I can't think of more covenantal work than affirming what we hold in common, setting clear boundaries for our personal and our communal health, and inviting continued connection as we grow and as we journey together. May it be so, dear ones. May we make it so. Beloveds, may you go forth with a good no. Shout your yes, speak your no with clarity, and offer connection and community to the people that will help you flourish and find your true north. Go with boundaries and with connection. Go for peace and for justice. Go in peace and go and be blessed as you are a blessing to others.